Hi, my name is Austin Chadwick, and welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. Co-host is Chris Lucian today, and on the air with us is David Adsit. We got some excellent topics lined up. These are very foreign to us, Chris. You know, we strongly dislike all these things. No. Just kidding, just kidding. Lean software development, collaboration, continuous improvements. So really excited to jump into these with you, David. But before we do you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Yeah, I'm Dave Adsit. I am currently VP of Engineering at a local company here in Austin, and I have been probably doing software development for the last 25 years in a lot of different capacities. Really enjoy building things with teams and building teams that build things. So I'm excited to be here and be part of this.
Nice, nice. So yeah, you have on here lean software development, small batches, short lead times, frequent releases, goodness and profit. I'll add to it. No.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what were you thinking here? What's on your mind in regards to lean?
Well, I was recently talking to one of my friends about philosophy and religion and all of these various things. And he's like, man, you give out more copies of Principles of Product Development Flow than most people I know give out copies of their religious texts. I'm like, yeah, that's probably true. I think a lot about our purpose as software developers. When we're hired by a company, our purpose is it's not to create art, but it's not really engineering the way we think of engineering. It's more of a craft to me. And that means that we're building a business. We're building software to solve problems for people. And so there's so many things about lean that I really like. One of them is that the idea that you're not creating value until it's in the hands of a customer. And so I want to shorten that cycle. I want to shorten that time between when we start the idea and when we put something in someone's hands so that they can actually start using it. And lean is my current favorite approach to doing that. If you'd run into me 5 or 10 years, no, probably 10 or 15 years ago, we probably would have been talking a lot about Agile and XP, and that was my favorite way of getting that done at that point in time. But where we're at now, I find that Lean shortens that feedback loop even more, removes some of the unnecessary ceremony, and focuses on the critical elements of ideate, build, test, deliver.
Cool. So, see, I'm guessing you're thinking like, release the product once every 5 years to like once a year, that kind of
You know,
frequency.
yeah, that's exactly right. Let me tell you, I am one of the very few developers I know who actually worked in a shop that embraced Waterfall as a strategy. I worked for a very large software company. Well, we weren't even a software company. I worked for a very large wholesaler that happened to have 3,000 software developers on staff. And we embraced the Rational Unified Process, or RUP, and we did annual releases. And it was the project that I worked on it had actually been accidentally lean. We would do one feature and then release that feature to customers and see what they thought. And when that got taken over by our corporate entity, and I went to the corporate offices, and first of all, we all put on our suits to go into work every day. Um, and then I found out that we weren't going to do a release for 6 months. And that was so that we could get onto the annual cadence with the rest of the products in the department. It blew my mind. I actually only saw that software released one more time after it was moved into the corporate office and the corporate headquarters. And then I eventually left and never saw it happen again. But no, we're talking about release cadence on the order of hours or days. Weeks feels like a long time to wait.
Right.
So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, what's funny, I might have been one of the other companies earlier in my career that was a champion of RUP. So
There weren't many. They didn't do a lot of software.
yeah, yeah, no, but literally it was baked into the process, proud and
Mhm.
yes, yeah, what you were describing was very, very similar to my experiences. And I had to do what's it called? Like black market or secret covert
Oh yeah,
ways to
yeah.
shorten feedback loops.
All the skunkworks projects.
Yes, yeah. So thankfully they wrote their policy and process documents vague enough that I could squeeze through ways to get faster feedback.
Yeah.
But there was a lot I didn't know in my early days, but that was fascinating. I remember someone drew a picture of everything that was required to change, like the simplest thing. I think it was like a value in a database or something like that, and it was like this gigantic uh sophisticated diagram of that involved
Mhm.
like 20 different departments, and it was hilarious. But
We we had 11 mandatory documents that had to be filled out
yep,
and approved by different
yep.
levels of leadership. And there were three additional optional documents if you touched anything related to money or the security or the network. And none of the projects I did required those additional three, but I spent more time writing Word docs than I did writing software.
Oh yeah, me too, 100%.
One of the things that made me really learn Python was all the scripts that I would write to fill out documentation for other groups and things. And so there's a lot of that where it was just like automate the writing of the documentation to then go out to everyone
Yes.
else.
There's a lot of copy paste.
Right. So I'm wondering, you kind of said, I know the transition from Agile to Waterfall, or sorry, Waterfall to Agile was, a big one for everyone. And you mentioned the transition from Agile to Lean. What do you see as like the big differences going from Agile to Lean, and like what came of that? How did that happen for you? And what was the maybe like incremental observations you had?
I think for me, the big thing was the way time boxes are used.
Hmm.
I think when I was working in XP or Scrum, we had 1 week or 2 week iterations, and every Friday, every other Friday, we were supposed to have a release candidate ready so that we could ship it the next week.
Yeah.
And it ended up being like whatever you got done got in, and a lot of times stuff didn't get done. And so we spent a lot of effort on trying to get better at estimating and get better at guessing how many story points we were going to finish in any given time window. Or I guess it was always the same time window. It was always 2 weeks, right?
Right.
Most of the Scrum places it was 2 weeks. The XP places it was 1 week. But it was the same problem. I always called it the cliffs of insanity or the scrummer fall, because you would get nothing done, nothing done, nothing done, nothing done, nothing done. And then 2 days before the end of the time box, you'd get everything delivered into QA. And QA would have to scramble to get their work done, to get any testing done at all. And they would reject half of it, which we expected because we knew we hadn't finished it. We had just given it to them so that it was off of our plate when it came to the end of the period. And so the way that you use a time box in Scrum is you're supposed to estimate it and then fill it. And the way that you use a time box in Lean is to say, this is the investment I'm willing to make in this thing. This is the size of the bet that I'm willing to put down on the table, and no bigger.
Right.
So if we have 2 days, what of value can we build in 2 days? Or maybe this feature is only worth a day worth of investment for me. I looked at it and I think, yeah, a couple of customers have asked for something like this. What can we build in a day? And whatever we've gotten at the end of the day, we're going to prioritize the most important thing and get it done. When I worked in a more Scrum like Agile, and I know this isn't how Scrum is supposed to be. I've read all the books, but this is just how it happened to go every time I did it, right? We would say, okay, here's all the things we're going to get done. And we would basically within the first day or two, everybody would start them all. And so you'd have everything that you were going to get done over the 2-week period in progress. And you'd be bouncing between things based on whether you got an answer to this question, or this one was unblocked, or maybe this one got blocked again. And now you're going to work on something else so that you are highly utilized as a resource, right? If we talk about lean, we're talking about resource efficiency versus flow efficiency. And we were all highly utilized resources all the time.
Right.
And I don't love referring to people as resources. I'm like, if we're talking resource management, to me, that's computers, that's network, that's not people. Personnel management and resource management are two fundamentally different things. So I think for me, the biggest thing is just like that mental shift from how much can we get done in a 2-week block to what can we get done to answer this one question, solve this one problem in a day or two, or maybe 3.
Yeah, yeah. And the investment bets frame, well, I guess before I get into that, I 100% resonate with your Scrum experience there. I've been in that sprint before, and I've been on both teams, the dev and the QA part of that team, where you're just swamped at the end, right? And yeah, to the investment bet idea, I really like that a lot, and I think I learned it from Chris. And it's fun to see when we interact with different parts of the business or customers, how they start to learn to think that way too. Yeah. Because, Chris and I, estimated that this episode would be 5 story points. And sadly it's turned out to be 5.5. So we failed you, David. But so instead of them saying like how much, they sometimes they do ask that question, like how long will this take, or, how much work involved. When we try to frame the conversation differently, it'll often turn into, okay, this is important enough to R&D and try to solve this problem for another day or two, and then we'll revisit, right? And so then, like you said, it's a bet, an investment for the next 2 days into this problem. And then if it's solved, then they're like, great. And then if it's not, then we have more data, and then we can decide to invest more days or not, right? Or, what have you. And so is that the kind of thing you had in mind? Because I find our teams doing that kind of thing fairly often.
Yeah, I've seen that so many times, where people, when they start thinking about it in terms of what size of a bet am I willing to make, how much am I willing to invest in solving this,
sure,
you come up with different solutions. And I think that really this is one of the opportunities for real engineering to happen. And let's think about like, okay, of all the things we could do, what's the thing that is the most important? What it's either the most impactful to customers, or it's the thing that we're going to do that's going to answer the biggest question we have outstanding. Because a lot of the time we act as though we are very sure of our solutions, but the reality is we're always testing them, because we never know what's going to really resonate with customers until you put something out there. I mean, how many times have you had the experience where somebody gives you your very detailed specification, your spec doc for the software they want, and you build it, and they're like, oh, this isn't what I wanted at all. Let me tell you what I really want. Now that I've seen the rough draft, let me tell you what really will solve the problem that I have. And if we can do that more cheaply, like we've tried many things, right? Prototypes, paper prototypes, interactive prototyping tools, and those help a ton. But there's nothing quite like getting into the software product that you're already familiar with your data, and seeing what you see when you build the new feature. And so, I mean, there's a ton of benefit to just shortening that learning cycle and accelerating that learning cycle. I had a training once with Mary and Tom Poppendick, and they talked to us about scope boxing versus time boxing. And at this point in my career, I had only ever worked in really scope boxed, like, we've got to build this thing. It's until we get this scope and we can't release it to customers. And they're like, you need to change your mindset to work on time boxes so that you can actually do the most important things, because we spend too much time building low value things when we build to scope.
Yeah.
I've seen this happen many times with teams. Even my current teams, we had an experience where the scope doc had probably 40 bullet points that all had to be done, but the team was operating in a very lean style, right? They were doing single piece flow. There were 3 developers on the team. So it was a very small team. 3 developers on the team working with single piece flow, continuous delivery, and they built the first feature, which was identified by their product manager as the most important feature. And they put it into the production environment behind a feature flag. And then the product manager showed it to the marketing group that had requested the whole suite of features, right? And they said, hey, we've got this. Do you want to start showing this off to customers and see if you can get some feedback for us on whether it solves any of their problems? And they're like, no, we want to take it general release right now. We want to give it to everyone. This is all we actually need. Don't even do the rest of the features on the list. And so we saved who knows how much time. I mean, we would have, in a more traditional style, if we had followed a waterfall or even an agile style, we would have tried to build all 39, 40 features, and 39 of them ended up not being useful to the customer or not being necessary to create new value for the customer.
Right.
I think we probably came back and did a handful of them later after we'd proved that people wanted the first most important aspect of that feature suite.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, it's funny that your story, I could almost repeat verbatim. I've seen a couple times in my experience as well when we operate that way, where I guess the story that comes to mind for me is marketing had come up with, all these different pages and things to do and all that kind of stuff. And then when we delivered the thin slice of basically, the most important thing, they're like, okay, we're ready to work on the next thing. So they're like, nope, you're done. You can move on to something else now. Like completely. And we're like, okay. And so, and it's fascinating how the shift in feedback versus theoretical reasoning versus something delivered in their hands and using it reasoning. Because when it was theoretical reasoning, it was a non-negotiable. All 20 of these screens had to be done.
100%.
You cannot shortchange us. And then after the first part was delivered, how it was like, now we don't need those anymore. You know what I mean? And so it's like I'm not sure psychologically what happens there, but it is a phenomenon that is real.
I have thought about it a lot.
Yeah.
I have a hypothesis about what's happening.
Okay.
Back in the day, you used to have to fight so hard to get any of the engineering resources to do any of the work, right?
Right.
And once it was your turn, you didn't want to give up any chance because you knew that like if you overlooked something, it would be 6, 9, 12 months before anybody looked at your critical part of the product again. And we through bad practices trained people to be very aggressive about what the scope of their thing needed to be. Because if you overlooked something, we're like, oh, that's a new feature request. We're not going to do it this iteration, this sprint, this whatever. We're not touching your thing again this quarter. We already did yours and we moved on. And so if you missed it, you missed out for who knows how long. And so people were trained to overscope everything and overthink everything. But when we move through an agile process into an agile process or a lean process, either one, we're operating at such a high cadence and such a frequent delivery rate that we can come back all the time. Like we can work for 2 days on one feature and then we can try it with customers and we can work on for 2 days on a completely different feature. And if we start to get traction there, we can reinvest there, or we can reinvest on the first thing again. And I've seen this with a lot of people who've worked in software businesses, and even a lot of product managers get really hung up in, I got to get it right the first time or it won't matter. And the thing is that we know that the best place to be when you are doing software development is right at the edge of learning, where 50% of your bets are right and 50% of your bets are learning opportunities for things that didn't go well, didn't go to plan, right?
Mhm.
That's where we're maximizing our learning opportunities. And
All right.
so that's kind of actually something I think is funny, is that I've shared many, many times the quote from Marty Kagan in Inspired, where he says, hey, teams, the best product teams are succeeding 50% of the time and failing 50% of the time with their ideas. And everybody says the immediate response from everyone I've ever worked with in product management and product management leadership is, and we're even better than that. I'm like, no, actually, that's the limit. Like,
Yeah.
if 60% of your ideas are correct, you're spending too much time in upfront thinking and upfront planning. Your goal is to have 50% of your ideas hit and 50% miss, because then you are operating at the maximum velocity for your team. You are
Yep.
learning at the fastest possible rate. If too few of them are right, you're not doing enough discovery. If too many of them are right, you're doing too much discovery and too much analysis before the developers get a chance to put something out in the hands of customers and see if it actually matters.
Yeah, I like to use the one time I heard it positioned as LD50, which is like the lethal dose 50%
Yeah.
that they use for drug development. Uh, and that makes it stick in people's minds a little bit more,
I
just
like
because
that.
it's so inflammatory, or I don't know if it's inflammatory, but something along those lines. Um, so yeah, that's pretty interesting. But it might be a good time to pivot to collaboration and talk a little bit about collaboration. You know, so I found lean help with collaboration as
Right.
well, because yeah, I got to talk to all the other people all at the same time. But what were you thinking on this topic?
Well, so there's a few things, right? Lean is it's an enabler of collaboration, and collaboration is an enabler of lean. So when we're talking about lean, we're talking about things like, we're talking about specifically focus on delivery. We're maximizing flow efficiency, right? And so maximizing flow efficiency means minimizing the time between idea and delivery. And so how do we do that when we have a group of people? We have everybody focus on one thing. It's so clear to people when you are in an emergency situation, you have a site outage, you have some kind of incident happening in your system, everybody knows that it's all hands on deck. No one ever questions that. Even if people are sitting there unclear how they're contributing, they know that they need to be there in case they have the idea or they see the connection that somebody else is missing. Everybody is all hands on deck on solve the incident, solve the outage, get the site back online, start taking orders again, whatever it is. And that's the fastest way to resolve the problem. And for us, every single day, our problem is I have an idea and I need it in the hands of customers so I can validate it, or I can improve their lives. I can create value of some kind. And so if we're doing a collaborative style of programming, whether it's mob programming or pair programming, we are working together as a team to deliver software the fastest possible way. That, like, I get in trouble for saying faster. I should say sooner, right? We're not necessarily typing faster. We're not necessarily creating more software. We're getting to the end goal sooner. And so that's our goal. That should be our goal. That is our goal in lean, and collaboration is an enabler of that. Also, lean, by focusing on limiting work in process and focusing on done, enables us to collaborate more. It enables us to say to a team, hey, I don't want the 8 of you to work on 8 things, or more likely 17 things, which, that was my experience in all the Scrum days. 8 people doing 17 things at once. I don't know. I've been told by psychologists that the human brain is incapable of multitasking, but I've been unable to convince engineers that this is true. So if we are operating in a lean way, we're saying, hey, the second this is done, it's in front of customers' hands. We're going to give it to customers today if we can get it done today. And so I want the 5 of you to get together and figure out how we can get this done today so that we can start getting feedback as soon as tomorrow.
Right.
Or creating new value as soon as tomorrow, because it can be both. Right. And so for me, they kind of build on each other. They are in support of each other. In Lean, we talk about limiting work in process and reducing batch size so that we can increase our frequency of feedback. We reduce those feedback cycles so that we're getting feedback sooner. And collaboration allows us to do that. In addition, collaboration also helps us build skills across the team. I think I got this from somebody else, but I've been saying it for so long, I've forgotten who. But for a long, long time, I've been telling people, if you want to improve your team, have them start pair programming. And if you want to improve your code, start doing test-driven development or start doing unit testing, ideally with the goal of test-driven development someday, right? Because every single person on every team knows something that other people on that team don't know. Whether that's the brand new boot camp grad who happened to learn a keyboard shortcut you don't know as the 25-year veteran, or whether that's the 25-year veteran who knows how the SS tables work in the database and can tell you why the page loads are slow because of the way the indexes are written, et cetera, and you don't even know what indexes are because you got out of your boot camp yesterday and they didn't cover databases in your boot camp, right? Everybody on the team knows something that other people on the team need to know. And so pair programming, mob programming, working together on a shared computer in a shared environment is the best way I know to communicate and transfer that knowledge.
Nice. Yeah. And I think it is kind of a light bulb moment for me in seeing, I like how you put it, that lean and collaboration are enablers of each other. Because you're right, one naturally leads to the other. And it's almost like they're two legs of a stool. It's almost like you can't have one without the other, right? And I think I kind of observe that, right? If you don't have good ways of collaboration, and then you just maybe in a draconian way say, here's the whip limit, thou shalt obey, right? Chaos kind of ensues because people don't know how to collaborate because the whip limit forces collaboration, right? And so it's interesting whether you start with one or the other, because right, if you start with just great collaboration, it's almost like the lean stuff will start happening. But if you start with kind of the lean limits, it'll force collaboration to happen and maybe force you to learn good collaboration, hopefully, or something. Yeah. Have you ever, I guess my follow-up question would be, have you ever seen it where there were blockages to one enabling the other and how you broke through that?
Well, I will tell you, when you say start with whip limits are an easy tool to grab for. They're an easy practice to teach people and to implement, and it has a lot of failure modes because there are two things that people do is if you introduce whip limits without giving them adequate training on what the goals are, and how whip limits enable your goals, the first thing people will do is they will just stop moving things into in progress when they hit the whip limit. They'll keep working on them, but they'll work on them in the backlog. And the other thing that, and that is just basically hiding work, right? One of the key goals of any lean process is to make work visible so that you can actually manage it. And so that you can actually manage the team to the work and vice versa. And so people just stop moving things into in progress, and they just work on them in the backlog until whatever the thing is that they should be working on gets unblocked. The other thing that they do is that they'll start something and they'll move it into in progress, and then they'll say, well, I stopped working on it, so I moved it out of in progress back to the backlog. And I will tell you, you cannot unstart something. You cannot unstart work in software development. It will hold space in your head until it's finished or abandoned. And so I say, and this is just one of those draconian rules that I throw out, cards don't move left on the Kanban board. You can move it into the trash, or you can leave it where it is, but you can't move it left. And so, yeah, let me pop the stack a little bit and get back. Can you reiterate your question for me, Austin?
No, that's great. And I guess you did answer the question, because my question was, what can happen when the enablement process from lean and collaboration fails? And the example you gave was people hiding work, or like you said, or unstarting work, as you said. Yeah, and I guess my question was, how do you manage that failure mode?
I mean, it comes down to education more than anything.
Mm,
You have to teach people the why behind the rules. Like, rules are great when you're just first starting out, but you have to, I mean, we talk about things like shuhari,
mm,
learn the rule, break the rule, become the rule, or the Dreyfus. Just today I had a one-on-one with one of my engineers, and we talked about the Dreyfus skill acquisition model. And, as you make progress, you learn a lot more about the why behind the rule. And if you can teach people why we're doing something, they're much more likely to do it. Engineers are puzzle solvers. I think we all are. We like to solve puzzles. We like to find the edge case. Many of us play video games and we will min max our characters, right? Oh, sure, I have 18 in strength and 18 in dex and 3 in wisdom. I'm like, so you make a lot of bad choices. Like, that's not how I play it. Right? Like, we have this innate desire to find the gaps that allow us to do what we think is right. And I mean, you talked about it earlier when you were working in RUP. You found the ways to navigate the pathways between the rules to get work done. And engineers do that. We will all do that if we find that we don't understand why the rules were there. It's the idea is the Chesterton's fence, right?
mm.
The Chesterton's fence is this story that if you walk through a field and you find a fence, instead of just taking it down because it's in your way, you should seek to understand why it was put in place and originally, because it might be very important to you. But a lot of us just want to knock a hole in the fence and we'll just go through it, right? And maybe that will completely violate the whole spirit of the thing, and
Yeah.
we'll miss out on all the benefits. And so for
Ah,
me, I like to teach people, here's what we're doing, and then here's why we're doing it.
mm,
And if you can do both of those things consistently, you can bring people along. And then they may disagree with you at the end of the day. I mean, I will tell you, one of the key failure modes for me in any kind of highly collaborative work style is that you still have that tension between resource efficiency and flow efficiency.
mm.
And if the most valuable thing that I can do to help my team deliver this feature today is sit on my hands and shut my mouth, that is psychologically the hardest thing for me to do. No one wants to be the underutilized resource. They may not want you to call them a resource, but they also don't want to be the underutilized resource on the team. And it's really hard to be that person who, like, we're at the point where in the process where we just need to get it finished and I'm not contributing. But if I go start something else, now I'm going to derail the team and I'm going to derail our priorities and I'm going to cause more problems than I'm going to solve by starting the next thing. And so that, to me, that's one of the things to watch for if you're on a team or leading a team that's doing collaboration is, are we providing people with enough opportunity to feel valuable and not feel like all of their work is completely subsumed into the collective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of funny. I've seen developers get into mobs where they want to be the driver all the time, or like they want to navigate everything, have everybody listen to them, or have people watch them type or stuff like that. And either they have to learn to live with it, or either that or leave and find somewhere that's not mobbing. Because I have seen that before, and it's kind of a funny antithesis, and so yeah, the desire for the absence of collaboration it leads to, or potentially leads to larger batches, longer lead times and less frequent releases. And so that's pretty, it's a kind of another factor of all this. So we are kind of moving along here in time. So maybe we can jump to continuous improvement and talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I think that's one of the core values of any agile or lean organization. It has to be continuous improvement. I mean, that's one of the stories from Deming's works about lean and about the Toyota production system and all of that, right? Is they bring in the expert in the Toyota production system and they show him everything they're doing in the whole factory. And they're like, we do this and we do this and we do this and we do this. And at the end, they're like, are we lean? And he's like, I don't know. I didn't see what you were doing yesterday. Right. We always have to be improving. It's one of the things that you'll hear often is like, if you could only take one practice from an agile workflow and adopt it, it should be the retrospective. Because if we're doing honest retrospectives, we will eventually develop maybe not exactly the same practices that we would have gotten out of a book, but we will develop the practices that allow our team to be productive in our environment. And so retrospective is a way for a team to improve continuously. And for me, I feel very passionate about developers continuously improving. I think if you look around at the technical landscape, it is immense. It is far greater than anyone could ever grasp in its entirety. And it's growing every single day. So any developer who is sitting still and not learning is falling behind. And it's not because they're not moving. It's not because of what they're doing or what they know. It's because the entire industry is accelerating forward so fast. Every developer I talk to wants to have an impact on the team, and they ask me what they can do to improve their impact. I'm like, go learn something more deeply, whether it's our front end toolkit, go learn React, go learn the new features of the new version of React, go learn them deeply. Go understand why someone would choose to use React versus Next.js. Go learn a backend toolkit that we use. Go learn, I mean, for us, maybe that's PHP or Go or one of these tools. Go understand the database. I think that it's surprised me how many developers don't actually understand relational databases.
Right.
That's basically felt like all I did for the first 5 to 8 years of my career was database queries and tables and index tuning and this and that and the other, right? And I talk to people now and they're like, I'm not actually sure how SQL works. I'm like, interestingly enough, SQL is a DSL that was designed so that you could hand your, I think back in the 80s, they were called secretaries, but your administrative assistant, a task, and go say, go do some reporting for me, right? And it was intended as a DSL that you could teach to a standard business user, not something that you had to be a developer to understand. And now we have developers that don't understand how to do basic SQL or basic database interaction. You don't have to be doing a relational database with SQL. You could be doing whatever kind of database it is. You need to understand it, or someone on your team needs to understand it deeply. And so for me, I think in an engineering leader position, one of the things that's critical for me is to provide opportunities for my people to learn. We do a weekly peer-led lunch and learn. We call it a lunch and learn, but it doesn't happen over lunch because our team is distributed. And so they don't all take lunch at the same time. But I encourage people to learn by teaching. And I encourage people to go spend our learning stipend on as many materials as you can get your hands on to learn, whether it's blogs or podcasts or things you actually have to pay for, like books and training courses and conferences and all of that.
Yeah, we often do lightning talks for opportunities for everybody to speak to everyone else. So you have 5 minutes to influence everyone on something you're passionate about. And it's kind of funny, but I totally agree about the database thing as well. We have kind of like a database normalization question on our interview, and it's disconcerting how many people don't get close to the right answer. And I think another aspect of it, I do like this like either or question that you posed there, because I do often ask people, it's like, do you really know why you would select a relational database over a NoSQL database? Or, do you really know why you would pick one technology over another? And then from there, it's like, I want you to know enough to have an opinion about one way or the other. But then in the end, be able to disagree and commit to a path or something. So that's a little bit of our manifestation of that. It's pretty interesting.
Nice. Yeah, and we are getting kind of close to time, but maybe I'll throw in one more question before you do. Yeah, since you're kind of you're kind of more coming at it from like Chris's perspective, from like a leadership position. So for something like continuous improvement, I heard you note that you try to provide time, money, and motivation, I suppose, for people to learn. Have you ever come across people who still don't?
Oh, yeah.
What do you do from a leadership perspective?
Well, it depends on the company and the organization I'm working in. At one of the organizations, we would just filter those people out through our interview process.
Ah,
We would be very explicit around, we want people who are continuously learning because, first of all, it was a company where we were doing educational software. And so it made sense that we could use that as a filter. If you aren't interested in learning, why do you even want to work with us on doing this continuous learning thing? But I think that there is a place for people who are content with their skills as they've developed them. It's usually more on legacy code maintenance, right? The people who don't want to learn new things, but they know the system as it stands. There can be a place for them up until the point where you replace the system that they work on, and then it's kind of a commit or die type of a thing, right? You're either going to move forward with your career or you're going to go find a different place to work that is more your speed. And I've seen a lot of people self-select out when you start doing things like moving forward aggressively with your lean adoption and your collaboration. There are people who self-select out because they are either content where they are or they're afraid of what could be. And so that to me is a completely viable option for people. Not everybody needs to be learning the latest thing all the time. I think it's okay. It's just maybe not a good fit for the team that you're on.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I think there's also this idea of I think from the Radical Candor book, they have the idea of the rock stars and the superstars, right?
yes.
And so at times a rock star may simply not have enough time for those things. There's also like explicitly dedicated learning time and like enforced collaborative learning time, but that then you lead to the self-selecting out. And one thing I liked about that book was the flexing between the superstar versus the rock star. Like maybe some life event really affects someone and they're going to, table the upward trajectory a bit. And so that can also you know I don't think there's anything wrong with creating spaces for people to pull back on the continuous improvement. And if it is a forever thing, then I think you're right. I've seen this many times where it's just like this technology is fading out and it'll live up to a point, and then but sometimes that technology lasts a whole lot longer and they're safe, and other times it doesn't. And so, but I think just the way that things work in that regard is good. But being a learning organization and having people that want to learn and improve is like just crucially important. But yeah, I think we're coming up on time here. So I wanted to ask if there's anything that you'd like to plug or share before we close out the show.
Well, I actually also have a podcast. It's the Crafting Code podcast, and my co-host on that, Alan Stewart, has also been a guest here on this podcast. So a lot of similar mindsets and cross collaboration between the two. So
Awesome.
that's probably it for me.
Okay. Well, for everyone out there watching, be sure to or listening, be sure to share this episode maybe with somebody who maybe they are back in the waterfall days. Maybe they don't understand the rules about or that they're following, and maybe this is a good motivator to grow beyond that point. And please chat with us in the comments and subscribe, hit the notification bell. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we look forward to next time. Bye, everybody.
See you.
Bye, everyone.